What if the global farmer protests you're seeing on the news, the land rights battles, and the growing pushback against debt and central banks are not random events, but part of a much older economic struggle? In this video, we are not here to sell hope or hype. We are here to explain where the ideas behind GESARA and GESARA come from, what is historically verifiable, what supporters claim, and why farmers, more than anyone else, sit at the very center of this story. Stay with me, because understanding this changes how you see what is happening right now across the world. Across the world, a powerful idea continues to circulate, one that promises economic justice, constitutional restoration, and relief from debt systems many people believe are fundamentally unfair. In the United States, this idea is known as GESARA, the National Economic Security and Reformation Act. Globally, it is referred to as GESARA, the Global Economic Security and Reformation Act. While mainstream institutions dispute that either has been formally implemented, millions of people continue to follow these ideas closely, pointing to legal history, policy shifts, farmer uprisings, monetary reforms, and political realignments as evidence that something deeper may be unfolding beneath public awareness. It is important to clearly separate fact from claim. GESARA originated in the late 1980s and 1990s within U.S. legal and economic reform discussions, particularly around monetary reform and constitutional law. Factually, GESARA was discussed in reform circles, but no enacted U.S. law titled GESARA exists in congressional records. Likewise, GESARA has no formal treaty status under the United Nations or the International Monetary Fund. Supporters argue that any implementation would occur through policy convergence rather than public declaration, but this remains an interpretation rather than a documented legal reality. To understand why farmers are so central to this narrative, we must look to history. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, farmers faced systemic pressure from debt-based financial systems. Many were trapped in cycles of bank debt, subjected to manipulated commodity prices, and lost land through interest-driven foreclosures. These conditions gave rise to the populist movement and widespread demands for debt relief, fair money, and protection of agricultural land from financial consolidation. What GESARA supporters often refer to as the farmer's claim is not a single document or statute, but a philosophy born from that historical struggle. At its core is the belief that land and food production are foundational to national sovereignty, that farmers must be protected from predatory finance, and that economic systems should serve producers rather than extract from them. This same philosophy is now resurfacing globally through farmer protests, land rights movements, and resistance to corporate control of food systems. Supporters of GESARA and GESARA frequently reference a set of 19 reform principles. These reforms are not codified in a single law, but many appear individually in policy debates across the world. They include debt relief, tax reform, constitutional restoration, central banking reform, asset-backed currencies, protection of private property, an end to predatory interest, transparency in government finance, banking systems that favor citizens, fair trade practices, judicial accountability, and the protection of farmers and food sovereignty. Whether one believes in GESARA or GESARA as legislation or not, these ideas are no longer fringe and are actively contested in real-world governance. Claims linking President Donald Trump directly to GESARA or GESARA must be evaluated strictly through verifiable actions, not speculation. Documented actions during his presidency include the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, repeated public criticism of the Federal Reserve, trade policies emphasizing national sovereignty, the replacement of NAFTA with the USMCA, executive orders targeting corruption and financial crime, and support for domestic energy and food independence. There is no official statement from President Trump endorsing GESARA or GESARA by name, and any connection remains interpretive rather than legally established. Where GESARA becomes most tangible is not in legislation, but in public resistance. A recent example occurred in the United Kingdom, where farmers faced inheritance tax measures that threatened multi-generational farms. Sustained protests followed, tractors filled the streets of London, public opinion shifted, and the government ultimately reversed course. Family farms were protected, and land sovereignty was defended. This was not symbolic. It was a real policy reversal driven by organized resistance. Similar movements are now visible across the world, including farmer protests in France, agricultural uprisings in the Netherlands, land rights debates in South Africa, and resistance in the United States to corporate farmland acquisition. Regardless of the labels used, these movements align directly with the core farmer protection principles often associated with GESARA. Whether one views GESARA and GESARA as hidden frameworks, aspirational blueprints, or symbolic banners under which reform movements unite, one reality is undeniable. Farmers are rising, citizens are organizing, governments are retreating under pressure, and policies once considered untouchable are being reversed. GESARA and GESARA may not exist as stamped legislation, but their principles are manifesting in real-world outcomes. History shows that transformation rarely announces itself. It advances through pressure, unity, and persistence, and that process is unfolding right now. Brussels after the farmer protests, streets overrun and by potatoes. EU halts troubled free trade deal until January. Thousands of EU farmers protest Mercosur deal with Latin America, threatening their livelihoods. Brussels looks like a war zone. Farmers turned the square in front of EU HQ into a choking tire fire. 10 injuries and 2 arrests reported so far. Tractor-turned dozer accelerates toward riot cops in Brussels chaos. EU-Mercosur trade deal with South American states not too popular with the farmers. 500 tractors with 10,000 farmers march on Brussels from all over EU to demand legislation change. According to Politico, that's the biggest protest since 1990s. Footage from Irish Farmers Association. Huge victory for British farmers, Starmer forced to back down. This is a major victory, and it did not come from polite lobbying. It came from pressure, unity, and visible resistance. After sustained protests and growing public backlash, the government has been forced into a significant U-turn on inheritance tax measures that threatened family farms. Farmers stood their ground, they brought tractors to London, refused to be ignored, and the government caved. British farmers are not assets or tax opportunities. They are custodians of land, food security, heritage, and national sovereignty. Imposing inheritance taxes on family farms would have accelerated land loss, forced sales, and corporate consolidation at the expense of generations who have worked the land. Instead, the people pushed back and they won. Let this be a reminder that governments still retreat when resistance becomes impossible to ignore. A fantastic result for Britain's farmers and a powerful example of what happens when ordinary people refuse to comply quietly. We inform, you choose. This library does not promote false hope or sensational news. The information shared is based on documented history, observable events, and careful research.